welcome back to Todos Santos. Over the last couple episodes, we've laid the groundwork for the university and the surrounding district, and today we're going to be filling all of it in with details and buildings, and hopefully make a nice, seamless area that fits in with the rest of the city. But before we get to the actual details, I'd like to direct your attention to the top of the screen, where I just added a little bit of a road network and some houses here, just to fill in this area that had been sitting vacant for a long time, and I was growing kind of tired of it being so bare and boring. So I added in a little neighborhood here, just in the same style of much of the other residential development that we've been doing in the city. And then, like we've been doing as we go along through the series, just extending some of these bus lines to meet up with this new area. This one in particular runs all the way from the area we made in episode 33, that high-rise neighborhood, all the way down here to the university and the freeway. I thought I'd begin this build with the main centerpiece of the university. This is the original building that was erected here around the beginning of the 20th century. And it is, of course, the quad that we built last episode. Although we're going to be really bringing it to life now. It just looks a little bare as it is. So beginning just with a couple important details. This very nice clock tower asset, clipping it in to the Mediterranean University building in the center here. And then also putting that functional fountain asset in the center of the walkway. And then there's this old worn tile decal that has apparently been in my mod collection since the very beginning, but for some reason it doesn't actually have a thumbnail in the Find It mod, so I had never used it until now, but I uncovered this, and we're going to be using it a lot to represent the flooring in some of these older areas. I just think it looks so cool, and it's a very detailed asset, so we're going to be using a lot of that. Now I'm using these planter assets, and I'm trying to avoid just having small blocks. I wanted to create slightly larger areas, so it looks like they have nice big spots to use for landscaping, because we're going to be putting, of course, plenty of trees in here to make it look nice and green and a bit more welcoming. To go with the theme that this place is a bit older and worn down, I'm using that exposed brick decal there, and then also just adding some wear decals, because I imagine this place would get a lot of traffic. I also put those flower decals down underneath these trees here. I'm thinking as they bloom and then eventually drop those petals to the ground, there would just be a little bit of a mess there. And then we also just have some generic flowering plants beneath the trees. Now just to fill in the rest of this area, I put down a ton of benches because I figured you need a lot of seating in a heavily trafficked area like this where you get hundreds and hundreds or maybe even thousands of people passing through every day and also just hanging out here and spending time. I really like using these concrete benches to make little corner areas like this. It works pretty well just to break up the monotony of plopping down the same bench over and over again. And I think the end result is fairly nice, although this area as a whole does kind of end up looking a little bit like a tangram arrangement, but I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. And because college students generate so much garbage, I also scatter a bunch of trash cans all over the area and really over the entire university. I just cut most of that out because it's kind of boring to watch the same trash can be plopped down over and over again. It's also actually boring to do it, but I suppose right now that's beside the point. And then on top of the planters, I'm adding in a variety of grasses just to make it look nice and varied, and then a few flowering trees as well. I'm imagining this is a place where they'd want to show off some of the local flora, so I just wanted to use a bunch of different things that I've been using in other places in the city, just so there's some continuity there. I'm not sure how accurate all this stuff is to Puerto Rico in real life. It's actually really hard to find an accessible, understandable list of the sorts of plants and animals you find in various places. And then you add in the factor that you have to actually find these things on the workshop. Someone has to have come up with this and put in all the, the hard work to actually bring the asset into being and upload it and share it. So yeah, I'm just not sure how accurate to life the particular species of plants are in this particular area, or just as I've been using them in the city as a whole. But I am trying to get something that's a little bit consistent, so you see the same sorts of trees in the same sorts of environments in various places in Todos Santos. Anyway, now I'm going over to one of these little cul-de-sacs that we made last episode that are just used for road access for many of the buildings in the university, and detailing it. And I'm imagining that this is the sort of place where you'd have your trash and your recycling for all these various buildings. Of course, they're going to be generating lots of garbage that they're going to have to get rid of. So we have a little walled in area This guy is working on unloading boxes for whatever reason, and he's getting tired of it, so he takes a little nap on the bench. But I made a few places resembling this across the university. I just showed it once, though, because they basically all ended up being the same thing, just in different places. I'm going quite a bit simpler with the details on the exterior of the quad. I didn't feel like it needed to be quite as iconic. And then to bridge the gap between old and new, I just added another one of these old buildings here, and I'm pretending that the new one is more of an extension instead of a standalone building. Now I'm detailing said building with just a similar palette of details. I really wanted to make sure that each plot of land looked like it was completely filled in. Obviously, sometimes filling in a plot of land means just making it look bare and grassy, because obviously in real life, sometimes you just have bare patches of grass or dirt or whatever. But I don't think the map theme by itself is really enough, or at least to me, it doesn't look like it has enough detail to work for that. So for a lot of these green spaces, we're at least going to add some trees and grass. Occasionally we'll add some decals and that sort of thing, just to break it up a little bit without making it look too crowded. Now I'm going around and adding this green fence around the entire university. First of all, because I really like this asset. Second of all, because I saw something somewhat resembling this in the real life inspiration. And third, it kind of works to delineate the different areas of the university, which I hinted at last episode. Basically, we have the original section with the quad and the chapel that we're going to decorate soon. And then there's kind of the secondary expansion. We had that weird kind of triangular building that I put down last episode. That would have been like throughout the middle and late 20th century. And then we have the more recent development, which is not technically part of the university grounds. It's off campus, but you have some skyscrapers and offices and that sort of thing that would still service the university, but it's not technically on the campus. So what that green fence does is it basically just shows you the main campus area where the first two kind of eras of university buildings are located. Now back to the original part of the university. I have this little kind of standalone chapel building. I talked about the logic behind this thing being here last episode, if you're interested in learning why this strange building is just sitting here. If you're interested in that, you could go check that out if you haven't seen the video yet. But I'm just trying to make it look like they've kept a small portion of the original landscaping and the building itself, of course, even as it's getting encroached on by all this more modern development around it. So there's just a nice little courtyard remaining here with a big statue and then some of these cottonwood trees that I'm making quite a bit smaller by using the comma key. Now I'm going through, and in the spirit of making this place a little bit more walkable and friendly to non-drivers, replacing this central road with an asset that has bike lanes. Which frankly just seems like a very university thing to do. And if we have to have this road running right through the center of the campus, which we kind of do to allow for road access, I'd like to at least dedicate some of that space to bikers. Now we're hopping back over to the student union. One effect of the way I created the path layout for this campus, which was piece by piece and then connecting them up as we go, is that I got this cool little triangular area, and I just wanted to put a little bit of a custom fountain in the center. I was getting kind of tired of the pre-built fountains that I've been using in various places in the city, so I just used that nice plaster wall asset and plopped a functional water jet prop in the middle. Looks pretty nice, I guess. Now, last episode I mentioned desire paths, and I talked a little bit about what they are. Basically, they're just informal paths, and I wanted to go around and add some details to these because, like I mentioned, they do tend to get kind of wet if it rains. You know, there's all this exposed mud. So I just wanted to represent that with those dirt decals. And then in some of these bigger green spaces near the big buildings like the Student Union building, I wanted to have, of course, another university staple that goes along with the bike lanes, which is lots and lots of bike racks. Instead of custom making one, again, I'm just copying and pasting one that I made back in episode 38 when I made a little bit of a metro transit center. I'm using these very detailed and beautiful bicycle assets by Ronix and just clipping them in to, I believe it's the vanilla bike rack asset, which, you know, you don't really need to get fancy with that sort of thing. It's just a couple loops of metal, but there we go. Got some bike parking. And then just to spruce up this green space a little bit, adding some grass, bushes, and trees, just the usual. I also put this little sign down. This isn't something I do all over the university, but it was just something I thought of where sometimes on college campuses, the buildings will have these big kind of fancy signs outside. So I just wanted to do that, at least for this one. Honestly, I just forgot to do it for the rest of the buildings, or maybe I was being lazy. I don't really remember. So on the other side of the Student Union building from the bike parking, we have this little pedestrian cloverleaf ramp, which I think is kind of funny. I don't know why. It's just fairly entertaining to make the Sims walk a little farther than they have to. I didn't think the pillars that came with this asset were quite detailed enough, or they didn't really have the right kind of practical shape that I wanted. So I just used these custom ones. Again, I believe this is a Ronix asset from the expressway pillar pack, or something along those lines. I'm just clipping those in there where they kind of make sense, trying to keep them out of the way of the path beneath. And I think the final result is fairly nice. Now in the middle here, we're presented with a little bit of an opportunity to do something interesting. And we have this little pear-shaped area, and I thought it might be interesting to have a water feature here. And then from there, it kind of turned into a cloister or garden kind of area, which I thought looked pretty nice. And I take this plaster wall network, just drawing out the number of nodes that I want, because I know I want it to be open on one end, so I just need 3 segments here with 4 nodes, and then just shaping it to fit this ploppable gravel piece to get this nice round park area. And even though it feels like it might be kind of exposed to the people walking up and down the cloverleaf ramp, we're gonna come in here and add some hedges and trees and bushes, and it ends up actually looking like a really nice, relaxing place to go. You may have noticed that as I'm building here, there's a little bit of stuttering in the footage. And now it's normal to have stuttering when you're moving something with Move It and the simulation is running. The game is going to be a little choppy. That's normal. But when I speed that up for the time lapse, that doesn't come through. So this is a different sort of stuttering that we're getting here. It's to do with some issues with game stability, but I'll talk a bit more about that later in the video. So I apologize if you find that annoying, but I just thought I'd mention it, and it is going to be addressed and fixed at a later point. But for now, let's move on to this main square right next to the Student Union building. It's really more of a triangle, but that's kind of irrelevant at this point. This would be like a big meeting area where people could go and do presentations or voice their grievances, or hold festivals or fairs of some kind or something. Just a general meeting space for people to hang out. Now there's this little bit of old tile. It's the same tile decal we used in the quad. And I'm just imagining that here, they're either sort of replicating that look, or maybe this is another area where they've demolished most of the old buildings, but they've left a little relic just for aesthetic purposes or historical purposes or what have you. Now, continuing to make this place a little bit more pedestrian friendly, we're heading over to the north side of the university, right along the river, and putting a simple pedestrian bridge in here that crosses over to one of the main avenues next to the big hills that are at the center of town. And then where it meets the avenue itself, I'm adding a crosswalk that has a traffic light on it so that pedestrians get a fair shot at crossing the road without being run over. And that's something I've been trying to include in various places in the city, mostly just because I think it looks cool and adds some variety to the road networks. Okay, now I'm faced with all this big blank space, and I have no idea what to do, so I just avoid the problem and head on over to the dormitory area. And apparently I felt that there was not enough parking in the vicinity of the dorms, so I added a gigantic parking lot there. Now I wanted to just go in and add a bare general set of details to get this place looking a little bit more alive without having to worry about, creating a story for each individual building and trying to do interesting things like that. So really I'm just adding a little bit of like a entrance area with that tile there and doing some general things like fencing and grass and just trying to integrate some green space here and there. Because definitely some of my favorite memories of being in college and just being on campuses in general is having nice green spaces with big old trees and that sort of thing. So as I was reminiscing about that sort of thing and placing down all those trees, the game crashed for the first time in years. I really have had a pretty stable game for a long time now. But I decided to just shrug it off, come back. I redid all the details that I lost. And then I also decided to add some of these little desire path type things to the dorm area as well, which I think kind of just brings a little bit more life to those plain green areas. And of course, it's realistic just because, college students are going to take the absolute shortest path to get wherever they need to go. And then I decide that there simply aren't enough trees in this area. So I do another tree pass and use all kinds of different trees using these acacias and a couple different types of palms. And then this. So I backed everything up, including my mods and all my mod settings and everything like that, and deleted everything to do with City Skylines on my computer. And then I reinstalled the game, downloaded all my mods again, made sure everything was up to date. And then I did a couple of other things as well. First, I increased the size of my computer's page file, aka I downloaded more RAM. Second, I unsubscribed and disabled many of the assets that I had not actually placed in the city yet, that I had no plans for, and even some that I had placed and I just thought weren't as essential to the character of the city. And then finally, I updated my skip.txt file that comes with the loading screen mod, which allows you to skip certain vanilla buildings if you want to. So I just increased the number of vanilla buildings that I was skipping. I will include my own skip.txt file in the description. It's very possible that I'm going to actually forget to do that by the time this video is uploaded. So if you're interested in that and it's not in the description, just let me know. I've also included a couple other links and some more information about stabilizing your game if you run into this sort of problem. Because as far as I can tell, it was a problem with basically just running out of RAM. And luckily, since performing all these fixes, my game has been as stable as bedrock. And I've been able to record, about 10 more episodes worth of footage with no problems. So now that everything's good on the technical side of things, we can get back to detailing the university, right? No, I still didn't know what to do, so I went ahead and added all these buildings. I'm not sure about this gigantic cluster of identical apartments here. Let me know what you think of that. Seems like just a little bit too big of a homogeneous area. So I might go back and cut that down a little bit and add in just some more regular houses. We'll see. I've mentioned this a few times on the series before in recent episodes, but as we move forward, I would like to really fill in all the areas that we work on down to the last detail. So here, I just wanted to do that by adding a sound barrier in between all these houses and the freeway. And then, of course, coming back and adding some trees just to fill in these last few gaps. And I think the overall look is quite nice. In the same vein, I'm just using the barest of quote-unquote details to fill in the stack interchange here. Just ignore that absolutely hideous and unrealistic line of palm trees on the left there. That's going to go away. Frankly, I don't know why I did that in the first place. And one thing that I like to do is after I add a bunch of infrastructure or buildings, I like to come in and add some bus networks, or at least extend ones that are already there. So this line runs, I think, all the way from downtown through the neighborhood that surrounds the big hills, and all the way down here to the university. It's a pretty important bus line, so we're just taking that and dragging it all the way along this road. And as usual, putting down some of these custom bus stop assets at each and every stop. All right, I think we've avoided this problem for long enough. So one thing I knew I wanted to do on this university, because they do have several things like this in the main inspiration, which I talked about last episode, but that's an amphitheater, which I think is kind of a novel idea as far as I'm concerned, because I live in a cold climate, so having an outdoor theater seems basically like kind of a waste of money, in my vicinity at least. But I could imagine how the weather in San Juan, or in this case, in Todos Santos, would allow for that. And actually, it would be a just generally nice place to have a class or watch some sort of performance or whatever they do at college amphitheaters. And while I was down here, I realized that it would be a great opportunity to hook it up to the city's ferry line, which I think is really cool. I'm trying to integrate ferry stops in as many places as I can, because I don't know, I just think like ferries, water buses, water taxis, that kind of thing is just very cool to have. So obviously this looks completely awful at the moment, but because this amphitheater is bridging the gap between one elevation and another, I just needed to use some networks to bring the terrain down and even it out and flatten it out and everything, and keep all those ugly cliff textures from poking up through the amphitheater asset. I just use that as an opportunity to run a pathway down on either side. So you could imagine walking down there, and you could either just use it as a path to get down to the river, or you could use it as access for the amphitheater, because obviously you can just climb into the seating area there from anywhere along the ramp. Now, this is the sort of build where you're doing all these finicky aesthetic details and you're not too worried about the functionality of the thing, where the mod procedural objects would come in handy. Which, if you're not familiar with it, it's basically a mod that adds a vertex editing module to the game, so you can take assets and mold them to your liking. That would have come in very handy for this build, but I just simply didn't have the mod at the time. Although, in more recent builds that have not been released yet on this channel, I have been using that mod and greatly enjoying it, although it can be kind of a time sink and it can be very fiddly in terms of getting in and getting every detail perfect, but it's very powerful, and I try to use it sparingly, but I don't want to get ahead of myself in this series, so just be aware that eventually we'll be doing some PO builds, and it's going to be a lot of fun, I think, at least if you're into detailing. Now back to the build. To bridge the elevation there where the cliff was sticking out, I just put down a couple of sound barrier assets just to act as retaining walls and to cover up the gap, and then I ran some hedges in front of it just to make everything look a little bit more green and inviting. Down at the bottom, I figured they would need some sort of drop-off area. Like if you were staging a play here, you need to run a truck down there to drop off props and sets and that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of a garage area, and then there's also just a little storage tent nearby that would maybe be for maintenance for the ferry or something like that. I don't know. Now, just to sort of make this look maybe a little bit more like a Mediterranean amphitheater, like something you'd find in Italy or Greece, maybe a callback to ancient Roman or ancient Greek culture, they have some of these pointy cypress trees here. Obviously, those are found in many places, but for me, they evoke memories of playing Assassin's Creed 2, I think it was the second one. I just remember running around the countryside and seeing those everywhere. So that's just sort of funny now to plant them down in Todos Santos, which is probably the most peaceful and least Assassin's Creed-like place on Earth. Now, I covered up the road down here with a pathway, and at the bottom down here, I imagine that they would want it paved because they're going to have trucks coming and going quite often, delivering stuff to the theater and to the little dock. And there's also a small maintenance building here. I've just been kind of placing these water pumps and also electricity transformers in various places just to make it look like they have various utilities spread out across the university grounds. And to make this dock look a little bit more like a real functional piece of transit infrastructure, just putting up a couple walls so that people don't go tumbling into the river, and also putting these bollards here. I realized that back in episode 29 or 30 or whatever it was that I made the cruise ship docks, I realized that I had put those bollards on backwards because you actually need to have the hook thing pointing away so that you can tie ropes to it. I'm definitely not going to go fix that, but I did do it correctly this time. Okay, time to get back to the normal sort of detailing. I wanted to make this triangular building stand out just a little bit because I thought it was such a cool asset. I wanted to highlight it a little bit more. So I added some big areas of bike parking, just copying and pasting that from what we did before, and just making sort of a weird curved little garden area here with these plaster walls and some of these nice flower cluster assets, some grass, hedges, palm trees. As usual, just taking bits and pieces from the palette of greenery that I've been using all over Todos Santos and putting things where I think they'll work. Now, I found this part of the build a little bit frustrating, and that didn't really translate into a very interesting section of the video, so I cut it way down because a lot of the detailing was just doing the same thing over and over again. So what I ended up doing was basically just filling in a lot of places with things we've already done. So I had some green spaces, desire paths, utility buildings, bike parking, and I just kind of scattered that in places where they made sense all over the university. So I'm just going to show you the most interesting bits and pieces of what I did to finish up the detailing for the university. I also encountered some kind of funny things. Like here, all these people were stuck, like they were waiting at the starting line of a race. And I think I figured out that that was caused by changing that to a nodeless node type with node controller. Node. I need to stop saying that. But it seems like when there's a transition between an elevated and a ground-based network, and you change it to a nodeless type, it seems to cause problems with the sim's pathing. And then, of course, there are things like this that have absolutely no identifiable cause. But I thought this was fairly interesting. It's not every day you see a confused, uneducated young adult exchange student with no name driving through the air. But here we are. Now, I did want to show you this area here. It's just on the other side of the railroad track from the pedestrian cloverleaf that we decorated before and turned into a little garden. I liked this skinny area between the hedges and the track there. And of course, because it's empty green space, I had to put a couple trees in there. And right nearby, there's this four-way intersection. I figured this would be the kind of intersection that would get a lot of attention. So there is this little bench area in the center with this big canopy tree that's so big, maybe it's been there since the beginning of the university, which would be kind of cool if they, maybe they had to move it and transplant it or something. But it's just been here the whole time. Generally, I tried to not pave over more than I had to. But I did have this area here along this cool, long building. So I did want to add some planters with some seating as well, just to brighten up the area and break up the big swaths of concrete. And then just to fill in these last few triangular gaps, I put down, what else? Some trees. I also thought the parking lot needed some greenery as well, so there are some hedges. And some more trees. Always more trees. Now, moving just over to the east, over by the roundabout, I wanted to make a nice inviting entrance for the university. So the idea was to have this map. It's of some sort of campus. It might have come with the campus DLC or the University City Content Creator Pack. I'm not sure. But I put that there. And then I really like doing these sloped walls in decorative areas like this. So I took this brick wall and sloped it, added some seating, a trash can, and then this little area of like hedge grass down beneath, and this little young tree nearby. Now I wall off the area behind it because obviously we have this big, gross decal sticking out in the back, which doesn't really make any sense. So I block it off with those walls and then cover it up with clusters of flowers and hedges and a few more bushes and trees. And then I also put a dirt decal there. And I'm imagining this would be like access for the groundskeeper or the gardener or whoever takes care of this sort of arrangement in the university. So there's just a nice little garden for those who are visiting the university. I'm pretty happy with the result. I think it's actually one of my favorite places in this entire build. So there you go. Now, I don't think it would really be a proper detailing video on this channel without a little bit of lighting. So I'm going through, I'm just using the lights that come with the campus DLC. I think they work pretty well, and plus they're already built into the campus path network that I used for most of this build. They work well to match up with what's already there. As for where I'm actually looking to put these lights, I'm really just trying to fill in any dark spots along the pathways or major areas where people would want to spend time. You never know when people are going to need to be on the university campus at night, and you want them to be able to see. But I also didn't want to overload the place with lamps and just make it like blindingly bright. I still wanted some pools of darkness here and there, just because there's something, at least that I find very relaxing about walking around a place like this at night and not having to wear sunglasses when you're doing so. Oh, and I hope you're still with me. I have a very quick question. I was thinking it would be fun to do a live stream of Todos Santos at some point. Now, I've never done a live stream before, so I don't know exactly what it entails, but if you are interested in that, if you'd like to join in the building of Todos Santos, do let me know in the comments, and I will take that as a sign that I should absolutely do it. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this episode of Todos Santos. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I can't wait to see you on the next one, where we're going to be preparing the city of Todos Santos for its main cargo hub. Bye-bye.